I'm Marcel. I write for the blog Lesser Known Gems, and I'm going to do what I've called mini reviews today. And what mini reviews are is pretty much books that I've read and liked, but I didn't have enough to say about them to write a full review of them on my blog, so I'm pretty much just smushing them together to have one video here today. And the first book I'm going to talk about is A Certain Smile by Sagan. And this book is about a girl in her early 20s who is contemplating having an affair with her boyfriend's married uncle. And that's pretty much it. And I really was hesitant to if I really liked it or not. The style of writing is very similar to The Awakening by Chopin, and that was also a book that was very, I don't know if I liked it or really not, because there is a distance in the style of writing. And that's also what you'll find here, that the main person is very much distant from everyone, and she doesn't really like anyone, she doesn't really like life. It's sort of yeah, that's the best way I can describe her. But the book does have a saving grace, and I'm going to read a quote. And her boyfriend, and this quote is about her talking about her boyfriend and comparing her boyfriend with his uncle called Luc. I would have liked to remind him of our summer days, our winter days and his room, and to add that all this couldn't be wiped out in 3 weeks. It wasn't possible. And I would have liked him to agree vehemently with me, to reassure me, to take me back because he loved me. But he was not a man. With certain men, amongst them Luc, one discerned a hidden strength that neither Bertram nor any other very young man I knew possessed. And when I read that quote, I got it. She's supposed to be a bitch. She's supposed to be a naive young woman who doesn't know how the world works. Because what that quote is pretty much says is, why can't my boyfriend accept that I will cheat on him? And the reason that the writer actually tells us that this isn't the right way of doing it makes it an interesting character, and it's pretty much a book about character growth. And if you're interested, if you like the writing style of The Awakening by Chopin, if you read Bonjour Tristesse, because it's the same author, you probably would like this as well. The last thing that was kind of interesting about this book is that she named the wife of the married uncle Francois. So she named the wife of the married uncle after herself, which I thought was very interesting. And at first I thought, oh, maybe this is something that happened to her, but the book was actually written when she was about 21. So she didn't. But I think that's also in sort of saying that this isn't the right thing to do. She places the sympathy with the wife of the married man. So, and that's sort of the saving grace of the book. And it is a very short read, as you can see. And the second book that I'm going to talk about is a play, The Power of Darkness by Tolstoj. This is my Norwegian copy, that's why the title is different. It was published in 1886 and is about as Russian as a Russian literature can be. It's very dark, and the people are dark and cruel, and they need to be dark and cruel because the world is dark and cruel and that's the only way they can survive. So it's Russian with capital R. Now, the reason I'm not doing a full review of this play isn't that there's not a ton to talk about. It's a very complex play, but it's very difficult to talk about it without giving away spoilers that would take away from the experience of reading it. So the play starts with the farm boy Nikita having an affair with the woman of the house and the daughter of the house, and that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about regarding the plot. What's interesting about this play is that it's actually based on real events. It's based on Jefrem Kolskov's trial and why he ended up through the trial. And Leo Tolstoj visited him in jail and interviewed him. Regarding the little information I could actually get from the real events and the real court case, he has expanded the plot in this play. So while the original story was much more about one man doing bad things, it's much more complex, and the characters are much more complex in the play. My issue with that is that he gives redemption to Nikita, the main person, Jefrem Kolskov, but he doesn't give redemption to anyone else. And when you've made everyone else so much more complex and in need of redemption, it was very hard to sort of not see that they are given it when the main person is given it. And I don't know if that's because Leo Tolstoj was much more interested in Jefrem Kolskov, if it had to do with this is how Jefrem Kolskov presented the case, or if that's just the way it did, that he sort of didn't see that the end had to change when the story itself changed the way it did. If you're interested in having a full discussion, please let me know down below. That video would be full of spoilers, so it would depend if people are interested in reading the play and then discussing it afterwards. The last story I'm going to talk about is the short story The House of the Vampire, written by George Velstock in 1907, and I'm sorry I butchered that name. It's about a young man who's not named, who is an artist, who moves into the house of a very famous artist, and then weird things happen. It's credited as the first psychological vampire story. And the reason why it's a psychological vampire story is that the vampire doesn't just drain him of blood, he drains him mentally and he drains him psychologically. I thought it was a very interesting story pretty much because it shows a different aspect of the vampire mythology. It shows a different way of viewing the vampire myth and what it means to be vampiric. It was also quite interesting that since it isn't, he isn't draining him of blood, but draining him psychologically, how less sexual and sensual the story is. I mean, it's about two men living together. You would think it's ripe with homosexual tendencies, and the way the story is built up is very similar to A Picture of Dorian Gray, which is full of homosexual tendencies. But it's not a sexual or sensual play. It's just about being drained and what it feels to be drained and trying to build yourself up after being drained. And that was quite an interesting, very short read. And I would recommend it for people who are interested in seeing a different way and a different side of the vampire myth. So that was everything from me from this time, and remember, it's better to be a witty fool than a foolish wit.